get right into it and talk about the views from the community. And joining us to do that, these wonderful men and women, all poised, waiting to chat with us. Let me introduce you to all of them. Ebru Pakchan is the Global Head of Payments at Citi. Marcus Sear is the Global Head of Cash Management for Financial Institutions at Deutsche Bank. Diane Reyes is the Global Head of Payments and Cash Management at HSBC. And Paul Camp is the Global Head of Transaction Services, and he is at JP Morgan. Thanks very much to all of you for joining us. Let's start with the first question, which is, as members of the community, what for you, if you had to choose one particular issue, your hot topic for Sibos 2012, and for this community, broader community to focus on, what would that be?
Okay. I think everyone here at Sibos is passionate about growth, growing our businesses, and our agenda should be about how do we execute on growth strategies. And I think there is three things which is important for that. Understanding our clients. We won't be able to grow our businesses if we can't help our clients' businesses grow. Mm-hmm. Collaborating with the industry, the strength of all the people here, we need to collaborate with each other. We spent a few hours this morning, a few of us bankers here, trying to think about how to collaborate. We have technology vendors we need to collaborate with, we have competitors, and we have even our regulators that we need to collaborate with. Last but not the least, I would say, is our employees and talent. They are very important in this execution agenda. Mm-hmm. So it's all about growing and growing with our clients.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So from my point of view, it's not just that week. So if you want to be successful in that business, you have to provide fantastic customer service every single day of the year. Mm-hmm. But if you ask me what is important for that week, there are two topics which stand out. One is, of course, connectivity. Mm-hmm. And transaction banking is about connectivity because by definition, you have always two banks involved into a transaction. Mm-hmm. And then connectivity is obviously an evergreen topic of every Sibos. Mm-hmm. So for Sibos 2012, I see three things. One is, of course, the shift of the trade flows from the west to the east, from the developed to the emerging countries. Then, of course, regulation, new and complex ones, local and international, but also existing regulations which still have to be implemented, such as SEPA, for example. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the constrained liquidity in the market. And the answer to that, how we can use technology in order to deal with it.
Okay.
I guess I would focus a little bit on what Ebru said. I think it's the faster growing markets. Growth is something that's easily lost when we're all busy trying to ensure we have the proper controls and compliant environment. I believe at Sibos we've got this as a key theme, the current regulatory and compliance environment. So we're all heavily focused on that. It's easy then to lose sight of where our customers are going, mm-hmm. Where the volumes are going, and how the volume channels are changing. So we need to focus on all that to be sure we have actually a future to build towards. Mm-hmm. And I think that has several implications. It's not just understanding our customer segmentation, what the top cities are going to be, how the currencies are going to evolve, but it's actually ensuring the architecture and the platforms are stable and resilient to take some of the volumes and to take some of the new types of payments. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd build on what my co-panelists have said. To be honest, the discussion that I love to have is around growth, it's around innovation. Unfortunately, the discussions that I find really dominating are mostly about regulation. Mm-hmm. So it's this managing of how do you grow a business, how do you manage a business when so much of the agenda is set and determined by regulatory investments, senior management attention on regulatory, and ensuring that the banks are in a good position, mm-hmm. either for Basel III, for Dodd-Frank, for FATCA. It's this raft of regulatory that we all have to deal with as an industry, where we, to be honest, have got to do it. That's the ticket to entry, and we need to do it well. And balancing that against the things that we all like to work on, not that we don't like the regulatory piece, but the fun piece of growing a business is really the energizing piece. I find that to be really industry changing. For many of the big banks, we have the resources to invest in this. For many of the smaller banks, and Sibos is about the banks, it's around working with our clients to help them to understand the regulation, understand what that means, and given their limitations, how can they work more with us to be successful vis-a-vis regulatory?
Is there a sense at the moment that obviously each bank is trying to do this on their own? Is there a sense that the banks need someone like Swift, for example, who could be a guide, if you like, or someone who could pool resources in order to help you all, so you're not just competing with each other and who can put in these regulations as fast as each other, and you can all work to, it's not a game of maintaining competitive advantage against each other, but you can all work to gain and grow your businesses, as you've been saying.
My view, and we had a discussion on it this morning with Swift, is there is a role for Swift, but Swift is not the answer. So I would say we as an industry, our clients need to embrace this, working with regulators. The regulators have a massive stake in this as well. But Swift can play a role, a facilitator role, a standardization role, but the onus and the burden lies with us to do the right thing.
But I do agree. I think Swift has a role also on the education side and advocacy side, and that's, if you think about it, how Swift was pulled together many years ago. There are certain things we all do, and those types of operations and processes, and this was part of our breakout session earlier this morning, we're focusing on where can they help us more so that we can ensure, as all leaders in this business, we not only convince management that we have to split our investment spend, but that we can be more cost efficient as well.
Yeah, so I would also echo this. Swift is an infrastructure provider who could help, but it's about the banks coming together, finding solutions. So if you look, for example, at SEPA, it were the banking industry which came together, and they found a solution for that.
And I think just a slightly additional perspective, it's the big banks have a role to play in terms of also helping training the community, especially the global community, in terms of what these regulations mean and what these regulations mean for our clients in many instances. So we have an important role to play to figure out how technology can help. And Swift's role, I think, is in really facilitating, as my colleagues are saying, in bringing the community together. But I have to say the big global transaction banks have a serious role to play.
Let's talk about some of your relationships with your clients, because as we've seen, even since Sibos in Toronto last year, I mean, it's become, the regulatory burden has just intensified, hasn't it? It's become more costly, more complex, etc. How are you dealing with clients like this? Give us some examples of what the relationship is, a color, if you like, of what this is like between your relationship with some of your clients.
Yeah. I think it was mentioned before that for smaller banks it's sometimes difficult to cope with all the rules and regulations, so they're looking to the global banks to do the heavy lifting for them. And I think that's our role, to be a partner to them and to help them to overcome the burdens and to have them sharing the investment spend.
I would say it's a much closer, transparent working relationship. It's not just the relationship and sales interaction between our respective institutions. Our compliance teams are actually coming together on an ongoing basis, and they historically came together in a sort of a committee structure, but now they're coming together on a bilateral basis where we want to understand something about each other. And when we're asking for information, there's a better understanding of why, a willingness to share the information, and not some concern that this is private information. So I think it's really been a much more transparent relationship.
Yeah, I would say it's both strategic and tactical. So we're engaging in strategic dialogues with our clients, very much the way Diane had said, in a partnership, but we're also working with them in very tactical ways. And I'll give you a concrete example around Dodd-Frank in the US, for example. So we're developing a Dodd-Frank solution for JP Morgan and for Chase in the United States, and we leverage that investment on behalf of our clients so that our banking clients can also leverage that to be successful. So our goal is to engage with the clients both strategically and then tactically with specific solutions we can bring to them to allow them to serve their clients, keep their revenue flowing, and very importantly, be compliant with the regulation when it's out. That's the goal.
Yeah. And it's really, I think sometimes when we talk about regulation, we only focus on the burden that the regulation brings. But in many ways, regulation is actually helping us out to really raise the bar and figure out the next set of innovation that we can put out there. And I'll give you an example in terms of implications of Basel III in the correspondent banking, which is obviously very, very important for the community who's represented here. When you look at intraday liquidity, when you look at the tightening of some of the resources, one of the things that we are trying to look at is how do we use data, how do we use technology to help our customers understand their usage around intraday liquidity, how they need to be doing more. So actually, in many ways, there is positive implications of the regulation if we all just sit back and take the right approach.
Regulation regulation as an opportunity for banks.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
I would add to that, and I think when we look at the regulation, we look at the short term, where we have to invest, and nobody wants to spend so much on investment when there's no real innovation, but regulation. But in the long run, with regulation, you could achieve stability, you could achieve confidence of investors, confidence of clients, and you could achieve the avoidance of systemic risks.
I think this is something I was thinking of earlier. Our job as leaders is to convince our management that the investment spend, or the order book as we like to call it at HSBC, is balanced. And as we go through these compliant requirements and we have to invest in those matters, you begin to say, okay, well, how do I become innovative?
Yeah.
And one way to become innovative, where the pockets aren't always deep, you have to find the money sometimes self-funding, as we like to call it, is to actually move your money around, be more fungible about what you do well and where the markets are progressing. So if you used to invest quite a lot in the developed markets, and you should be investing in the emerging markets, then you can actually make the regulatory compliance requirements and make it a competitive advantage in the future, but ensure that you're moving people, both resources and investment spend, to the emerging markets. So you have to make a conscious decision.
Sure.
I agree, it's a world in flux in terms of managing the priorities around meeting the regulatory requirements, and if we do it well, we become a better industry, right? So that's what we're all shooting for with our regulators. The difficulty, I have to say, which would be interesting to hear from the other panelists, as you become a more global institution, you're dealing with multiple regulatory bodies. So you have your home regulator, and then you have a regulator in every country where you plant a flag. And as you're supporting your client base in that globalization effort, which is something we've done quite a bit of, it's managing and ensuring that you're innovative, you're driving the product agenda, you're supporting the clients, and then with each new location, you add another regulator to the fold, which is an evolving challenge, I think, that we all deal with.
Yeah, we do this all the time. We have an affiliate structure at HSBC, and something I've learned since I've been there over the last year or so is that we have to get regulatory approval in many jurisdictions. So when you think about rolling out a mobile channel on your normal electronic banking system, instead of just getting a single regulator, we have to go to a half a dozen.
Yeah.
But once you do that, and once you've gone through 2 or 3, you pretty much provide the same information to the others. They're all speaking to each other actually these days, so it's best that you have a uniform approach in any event. And I think your product is much more stable and easily commercialized once you've gotten the clearance.
Marcus?
I'd like to add one more point. I think, and I'll go back to what I said at the beginning about executing on the growth agenda. The last component that I talked about was people and talent, and that becomes extremely important when you look at something like regulation. Paul picked up on the point that there is multiple regulators, multiple countries. That's something that we've been dealing with at Citi for many years. And myself, originally coming from emerging market, it's that diversity of people and experiences from both developed markets and emerging markets coming together and trying to help our clients understand some of those regulations. So I think the people part is extremely important.
I really agree with that, and it's culture. And as leaders within the organizations, it's setting a culture that's a culture that risk management really, right? So it's regulatory, but it's risk management is embedded in everything that people do. And that, whatever your role is, if you think like a risk manager and you build things with this risk management mentality, it's a cultural, I don't want to say a shift, because we've trained our teams to be bankers, but it's the next evolution on the culture side, which embraces that. I fully agree.
Isn't that what the regulators are actually looking for? It's your intent, your culture, your training, sort of how you value what they're looking for in the risk mitigation environment. So, I think Ibra's absolutely right.
Final word from you, Marcus.
I think the cultural element is critically important, and as global banks, we have to make sure that we are able to deal with all the different cultures and to bring this home. But I think the other point I wanted to stress, and Paul mentioned this before, it's then also the art not to develop something for your own company, but to make sure that you develop this and that you could also offer this to your clients so that they could use it, that they could also benefit from your investments in technology.
Okay, well, thanks very much to all of you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us.